You're selling your home and you need to purchase a new one. How do we do that? Stay tuned. I've got the answer for you. Welcome to another episode of Inside the Deal Through Michael's Eyes, a fresh take on real estate and business in general. My name is Michael Renick, and I am your host for this podcast. After a 31-year career, I retired from General Motors at the very young age of 52, and I moved right into building my real estate career. I currently hold a Florida's real estate broker's license, and I focus on serving Florida's West Coast. The purpose of these podcasts is to educate, to talk about how business should be done right, and to hopefully when you walk away after each and every episode, you've got something to take away with you. And to address this, I've got my buddy back with me, and I'm going to live on the edge here. I always mispronounce his name, but I'm going to try to get it right. I call him Don B affectionately. He's the guy that always helps in terms of getting the tough deals across the finish line. But I'm going to say Don Bartolomucci. Am I close?
Oh, wow, that's way better, Mike. Good job. Good job.
Now you do it. Go ahead. How do you pronounce it? Was I there?
Yeah, you're there, Bartolomucci. Yeah, you did really, really well. Really good.
All right. So it's Friday the 13th when we're filming this. This won't go live for another week. But let me just finish kind of the background. When my clients need a great mortgage person, Don is the only one that I refer out. Over the years, he's demonstrated the same passion that I have, and that's doing business the right way. As we all know, the mortgage process is a difficult and complex one. With an extended partner such as Don, and now that I can pronounce his last name after all these years, we have someone that guides my clients seamlessly through the process and delivers a quality product each and every time. What I personally like about Don is that he does not offer excuses, but instead he works to find a solution even in the most difficult cases. And Don, for the folks that are listening, not watching, would you go ahead and verbalize your email address and your cell phone number for us, please?
Sure. Don Bartolomucci, my telephone number, 941-227-7618. And the email, easiest is Bart, that's bartandteam@gmail.com.
Very cool. I remember when we used to do videos in the old days, 400 or 500 years ago, we would both, when it came time to give our cell phone numbers, we would just draw a blank. But now I've got them pasted on the screen so we can see those things.
I can read it, right?
So that works out good. Well, let's jump right into this. This is a kind of an interesting topic, a very good topic. But let me fire away with some questions, if that's okay. What's the biggest myth about buying before you sell?
Well, obviously from my perspective, as we're talking about mortgages, you generally think of the buyer when you think of mortgages, but many times, the seller vacating the house that's selling their house, they're moving somewhere, and probably more times than not, they may need a financing on the other end when they purchase their new home. Mm-hmm. So with that, Mike, many times there comes some anxiety. I mean, think about it. I'm going to sell my house. What happens if I can't buy a house on the other side? Am I homeless? So, what prompted this topic was being able to have a conversation with a mortgage professional before you make that decision so that you can identify, do I need a mortgage on the other side? When I refer to the other side, you know what I'm talking about. When I sell my house and I'm going to purchase
it's when the seller goes over to become a buyer. It's kind of like a combined transaction. It is, but it isn't. But a seller who's selling a home, it could be a relocation or moving to another part of the same area, maybe a step up, maybe a step down in terms of retiring or whatever. But the question gets into, how do you do? I mean, selling your home is a complex transaction. Now you're going to sell and buy a home. It's even more complex. So how do we do that? What are the steps?
This is the exciting part for me, because I have a lot of conversations with sellers, And we discuss how they're bridging the equity out of their house to the next house, how they're getting a mortgage on the next house with a current mortgage. So there's a lot of different ways to do that with bridge. Everybody's heard of bridge loans. Everybody's heard of second mortgages. Everybody's heard of reverse mortgages. There's a number of ways to accomplish that. And depending on the seller, the person selling their house, depending on their needs, by needs I mean, do they need to sell their house and immediately move into the next house? Do they want to buy the next house before they sell their current home? And is there a way to do that?
Let's take the toughest one. So I need to, when I sell my home, I need to have another home to move into immediately. How do I do that? And let's say I may or may not have enough cash out of my sale to buy the new home. So I've got I don't have it in the bank. So what do I do?
So, well, how about if we talk about it progressionally like this? So with your premise, I'm moving from this house and literally walking down the road and moving into my next house.
Yes, sir.
If I have enough cash, it's a cash transaction. I'm going to take the money at closing. My closing attorney is going to wire those funds to the next closing so it's available for me immediately. Let's say, as you suggested, let's say option 2. I don't have enough cash from the sale of my present home, so I need to get financing or some other vehicle so that I can come up with the additional money. That's where you need to, the seller in this case would have to do their mortgage paperwork simultaneously while they're selling their house so that we, as the mortgage company, have their mortgage ready for them so that we can close that loan in our terminology back to back. We close on our house in the morning, we walk down the road, in the afternoon we close on the next house, and the mortgage has to be ready for them then.
So let's talk about that. So let's say I want to walk that scenario here. And so I need to get approved, obviously, for my new mortgage after I sell my house. So are you going to take into account that let's say I have a mortgage on the first house too, my current house. So when you go through the financing and you do the approval, we've done a video on full approval kind of deal because we all love to go through the underwriting process. I love to say that. That's just something, I wish I could do that a lot more. And I've got some stories I could tell about underwriting. But anyway, let's come back to this scenario. It's Friday the 13th. What the heck? So I now need you to approve me for my new mortgage. I assume that you're not going to add the two mortgages together and those go in my ratios and all that kind of stuff. Is that true?
If the house is going to close prior to the purchase of the next house, you're correct. We just ignore that mortgage. We don't count it. And then what we get is a copy of the settlement statement or the closing disclosure in today's nomenclature. We get the closing disclosure and we show that loan was satisfied. And then the net number at the bottom is the proceeds that you got from that. So now we approve the mortgage subject to the closing of that previous house and the net assets of X amount of dollars.
Ready for a curveball?
Ready.
Oh, this is a big one. This is a high, hard fastball coming at you. So we've got that set up. It's the morning of whatever date I'm selling my house. That afternoon, I'm going in to buy my new house. And it's all set up. Everything's ready to go. Something happens and my home doesn't close in the morning, but I still have to buy that house in the afternoon or I lose the deal. Is there a possibility to do that?
We try. That's a problem, Mike. There's no fastball. That's no curveball. That's
strike one.
That's a strikeout. However, we usually try if we have the option, if we have the resources, we usually try to at least have a plan B in place for the seller and God forbid, something like that happen. Sometimes there is no plan B because there are no other resources available to bridge that mortgage. But the high fastball is a strikeout that you don't close until that property
But
sells.
you said the key thing: an experienced mortgage broker is going to have a plan B if one is available. In other words, if the assets are there or whatever, you're going to be prepared for that. You're not going to be surprised at noon on that day because you've not had that conversation with the seller/buyer. Correct?
That's correct. And Mike, you know what's interesting? Right before this, before our conversation right now, I just talked to a previous customer. I think this is the fourth transaction I've done for her. And every transaction.
Stop right there. That's a testimonial to your service. Go ahead.
But every transaction that we've done together, she has bought before she sold because she wanted time to move her furniture, paint, do things in her timeline rather than it have to be done in a fire drill. Now, she, in this particular case, has the resources to do some things. So we take, in her case, we take the biggest mortgage we can get on that new house that she's buying. Then whenever her other house sells, we take that equity and we transfer it to the new mortgage and we recast the loan. In other words, we re-amortize it so her payment comes down. But again, that's just one way of doing it. So back to my point, buy before you sell.
Let's talk about that. So let's say I'm in that situation and we've got a $500,000 mortgage on my new home. And we'll talk about how I qualify for that in a second. But we've got that. Now I sell my current home and it closes and I have $300,000 worth of equity. You're going to allow me to take that $300,000 and subtract it from the $500,000 mortgage. And that's called recasting?
That's correct. Right.
And so my payments...
Not a prepayment. It's called a recast. There is a difference.
What that means, though, is my payments are going to come down to a $200,000 loan, not just like I just paid $300,000 and I'm still amortized at $500,000. Correct?
The analogy I use is, and I don't have one here, but think about when we do a mortgage, we stretch the rubber band out for 30 years. And if you prepay the mortgage, that rubber band shrinks really fast and you pay it off early. That's a prepayment. With a recast, what we do is that rubber band stays stretched out for 30 years, but what we do is we lower the monthly payment instead of reducing the term.
So on the prepayment, your monthly payment stays what it would have been at the $500,000.
That's right.
And on the recast. Now, so let's talk about that. I'm going to go through that. Do I have to qualify for the additional $500,000 worth of debt on a normal level? You take anything into account, the fact I'm trying to sell my house, or are the same ratios, all that stuff apply?
Everything applies. Yeah, you have to qualify with the new mortgage payment, the old mortgage payment, and whatever other debts that you have. A lot of times with retirees, you have IRAs and 401ks and things like that. And we can use those assets as income, and it allows us to put a Band-Aid to temporarily get you to qualify for those larger monthly payments temporarily because you have the resources to do it. But once again, I keep going back. That's why, in my opinion, and why we're having this conversation, Mike, why that seller really should have these kind of conversations and about buying before they even sell.
And so they not only need access to a good mortgage broker, they need a good real estate broker who gives them that advice because they don't buy and sell every day. And that's why we're having these podcasts, quite frankly, so you can share that. But let me ask you this. I don't like that idea. I don't want to do that. So how about this? What are the rules if I want to get a bridge loan? How does that work to tie me over until my home sells?
A bridge loan is another mortgage. It's a loan. Bridge.
But is it a shorter term? I'm not taking out for 30 years.
You're not taking it for 30 years. It's more of a demand note. It's basically it's due as soon as you, obviously, like any mortgage would be, it's due on the sale of that previous home. The difference with those is there's a timeline. They're not cheap. There's an additional expense with that mortgage as well. That it's just a fee that you pay for the right to be able to borrow that money short term. But once again, like, you still have to qualify with the payment.
Same way as on the other loan. It's the same ratios, all of that.
Because there is a monthly payment on that, because what happens if you don't sell the house in the period of time that is allotted?
Well, that was my next question. I get to ask the questions here. Let's discuss the roles here.
All right.
So what does happen? I have no idea. You can take both houses away from me?
It's going to be extended, but boy, it isn't cheap. So I am of the opinion that everybody thinks, and usually it happens, your house sells quickly. But what if it doesn't? So I like to suggest other options that are less expensive and less risky, that will solve the problem the same way.
And those might be what?
Equity loans.
On the first property, right?
And actually, that's the beautiful thing about this. We could do an equity loan on the house you're vacating, or on the house you're buying. Think about this, that $500,000, look at my hand, boy, that's big in that screen, isn't it? The $500,000.
Don's got his new camera up in case that you guys haven't seen that. We're working slowly here. Technology, Don is great, but technology is, he's coming along.
So back to your number, $500,000 loan on this new house. Remember your example? And you got $300,000 in equity on the house you're vacating. Why not take a $300,000 second mortgage on the house you're buying and a $200,000 first mortgage on the house you're buying? 2 + 3 = 5.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you sell your previous home, you take that $300,000 and you pay off the equity line, and you're left with the $200,000 loan that you wanted in the first place. So you've premeditated a recast.
And so the approval process is less arduous, because I'm not asking you for $500,000 up on the new place. Well, no, I'm still going to get a $500,000 worth of line of credit, right?
You answered your own question, yeah. But the beauty of that option is that once you pay off that second mortgage, let's call it a home equity loan. Mm-hmm. You can keep it and borrow it again if you want, use it as a credit card. So you
sold that house.
Well, no. We sold the house, but we're paying off the second mortgage.
Yeah.
But if it's a credit line, you can pay it off and you can use it again. That's why it's a home equity loan. So it gives you other options, and every borrower, every situation is different. And that's usually a good option if you want the safety net of just having access to that equity if you would ever need it in the future.
So let me step back and summarize for a second. For sellers who are contemplating selling and purchasing another home, point number one, there's multiple alternatives. To walk through those, you need a very experienced mortgage broker to bring these things over the finish line. Someone who's going to honestly sit down and talk about options and not try to push you one way or another, but just to in other words, lay out the salad in the salad bar and allow you as the seller, new buyer, to select the option that's best for you. Does that make sense?
It does, Mike. And I can tell you selfishly, as a business person, one of those options is better for me as far as income goes, as far as a fee. But that's not the goal here. The goal here is to lay out all the options for the seller and identify what works best for them. Because here's a perfect example. This lady This is number 4 that we've done for her. And if I would have not given her the best option on the first transaction, I don't think she would have come back.
See, I love that. That's a whole nother video in terms of there's too many business people that look at the short run. I'm giving up 11% of what I could have made on this deal because I'm going with option B instead of option A. And first of all, it's all about the customer. And that's why you and I make great partners, because I look at business the same way. What's right for the customer? It's not about maximizing the revenue you make or I make. And when you do it that way, what goes around comes around, in my mind. That client is very, very happy, and they're going to come back. Like I'll give a case in point. I was thinking about this morning. I don't know why. I was going up to Tampa. I'm based out of Sarasota to buy a brand new Corvette Stingray. They had just come out with it. I want to say it was 2014. And I knew the general sales manager. He had left a Sarasota dealer. In fact, he got fired. Now that I think about it, he went up there. He's a sales manager. And so he knew what I was trading in. He knew it was a Camaro. He knew it had 24,000 miles on it, and a whole bit he knew it was in good shape. So we had it all agreed upon. So we get up there, and they were hard to find, by the way. These were brand new Corvettes. We get up there, and all of a sudden, he walks around the car and says, well, there's less tread on the tires than I thought, and there's this and that. And all of a sudden, he wanted 3,000 more. Well, I wanted that car. You couldn't get them anywhere else. He knew how much tread was on the tires based on the miles, I said. So I bought that car. But I'll tell you what, he's reached out to me multiple. I would never buy another vehicle from him. And I would not on the podcast. But when people ask me about this, I'm not afraid to mention his name in the dealership. It's not the right way to do business.
I had if you can tell, I'm pretty old now, Mike. We're up in age. I got no hair.
No, we're experienced.
But a long time ago, one of my first direct report, one of the first bosses said, there's short money and there's long money. Don't chase the short.
Mm-hmm. A good friend of mine who owns the Lazy Lobster out here, Michael Gary, and I'm not afraid to single him out, taught me a long time ago this kind of business, and he says he wants happy money, and that's the same thing. So what we're talking about here, and this is the reason for the podcast, because there's a right way and a wrong way to do business, and when you do it the right way, you get rewarded 100 times over. And it is about doing business right. And like we talked about in this deal, you're going to lay out the options and you're going to do what's best for the client. I do the same thing. It's interesting when someone talks about pricing a home and they've got their value and it's a lot higher than market value. Once in a while, someone will say, well, Mike, you're out to maximize your commission. I'm saying no, because if we listed at the wrong price, there's not any commission anyway. It's about getting you the highest dollar. And so this is why we have the partnership, you and I.
And Mike, the reason for this topic, that I was excited about is, that pre-approval process and that mortgage process. We always think about a buyer, but the seller, take the risk out of your and the anxiety. Take it away. Know all these different options, as opposed to sell your house, then scramble. Where am I getting the rest of the money? How do I do this? Let's take all that stress off the table and buy before you sell.
Yep. It's about doing the right thing. So what I wanted to accomplish with today's podcast is we're letting a seller who may find themselves in the situation know there's options, but you've got to work with experienced people. You've got to have a motivated mortgage broker that knows the alternative, that has the experience. You also need the same with a real estate broker in terms of someone who's going to work through, not push, but to work through at your pace and to show you alternatives in terms of the home you want to buy, how we want to market the home you want to sell, what's the right price range. It doesn't behoove the seller to try to go for a price range that's way above market value and expect to get it sold. You have a $50 piece of stock. There's very few people who are going to pay $56 for it. So, but conversely, there'll be a lot of people that'll pay $46 for it. We don't want either one of those. We want the $50. So the key is it's all about options and experience. Would you agree?
I wouldn't know these options if it wasn't for those 38 previous years of doing this, right?
Only 38. You're still young. You ever think there would be a day that I would push you into a new camera? This is great times out there, and just to have a little more fun. These are not pre-recorded. These are pre-recorded, but they're not live, and it's a good thing. Don had a hard time getting the camera to work. It was good. Don, we've had a lot of fun. It's Friday the 13th when we're recording this. I think the world of you, and your approach is the same as mine. Is there anything else that we should share in terms of how this could happen to potential sellers out there?
No, I think we covered all the bases. There's fees attached. Everything. There's nothing in life that's free, as they say. So all these options that we discussed, and we didn't even touch on every one of them, but each of them have their advantages and disadvantages as it comes to fees as well. But those are all the things that we take into consideration when we do the analysis of your situation and what you're trying to accomplish. And then guess what? You get to make the call, which is the best option for you.
And that's the right way to do business. Plain and simple. Anything else?
I got nothing.
I'm going to try it one more time. Let's live on the edge. It's the 13th. Bartolomucci.
How about Don B?
Don B. The problem is the caption folks picked it up as Don V as in victory, not B as in Bartolomucci. So anyway, enough said. Don, I want to thank you. It's Friday afternoon. I want you to have a great weekend. We'll engage again next week, but I appreciate everything that you do. Take care. Have a great weekend, Don.
Bye-bye.